Thank you for taking the time to review this brief presentation on the General Fund's 2022 budget with a focus on taxes. And it's important to know specifically about the General Fund because this is the fund that pays for all of our general governmental services. Services like police, customer service, legislative activities, administration and engineering, human services, just to name a few things. And a big chunk of the General Fund actually goes to pay for street operations. So let's talk first about what pays for general governmental services. The largest portion of our resources, in blue, comes from taxes, about $7 million or 65% of our resources. This primarily includes sales tax, property tax, and utility taxes. And we've not had a general fund tax increase since I started working here in 2010. The only increases that I've seen in taxes since I've been here were voter approved or voter requested for specific transportation related projects and police facilities here at the Civic Center. Charges for goods and services comes in second at about $3 million or 26%. And the biggest chunk of these revenues you'll know as overhead allocations. And that's where a department within the general fund provides services to other funds and charges for that work. So for example, when finance staff do all of the utility billing work for the water and sewer funds, we charge them appropriately. It also includes revenues like public works property management services, park services, engineering plan check fees, and inspection services. And this particular category is why it's so important that we update our rates and fees as part of the budget process. You'll know it as Chapter 3.68 in the Sequim Municipal Code. This particular category also includes revenues from the school district to help us pay for our school resource officer. So again, that's our second largest source of resources. And then we have licensing and permitting, intergovernmental revenues like state shared revenues and grants, and then miscellaneous revenues like interest earned on investments and rental income. So let's talk more specifically about taxes. As I mentioned before, we haven't had a tax increase in the general fund, again with the exception of property taxes, since I can't remember when. So we have walked the walk in terms of our budget policy and council goals to minimize rate and taxes and tax increases on our constituents. So on this chart, the blue bar is our property taxes and represents about $1.7 million in 2022, or 23% of our total taxes collected. Upward from the blue bar, you'll see the largest revenue source, which is our sales tax, represented by the red bar. That's about $3.8 million, or 50% of our total taxes collected. And the great news here is that we estimated that about 60 to 70% of those taxes, the sales tax, are paid by folks living outside the city of Sequim boundaries that come into the city to do their shopping. The green line is utility taxes. That represents about $1.8 million, or 24% of our taxes. And then finally, there's the other category, which is a small amount of criminal justice tax and leasehold tax. We'll talk more about those later. But this chart shows one of the reasons why the city never had to furlough anyone during the financial crisis that kicked off in 2008, and why the city did so well financially through the COVID pandemic, because it takes a healthy mix of revenue sources to withstand financial hardships that might impact parts of our economy differently. I love this chart on historical sales tax receipts. It is color-coded by industry: yellow for accommodations and food service down at the bottom, red for construction, and then again you'll see the lion's share of taxes is purple and represents our retail environment here in Sequim. And again, we are thankful that probably 60% of this is paid for by non-residents that come into the city to shop. The light blue is wholesale activities, and the gray is just all other industries. You can clearly see when the big box stores started coming to Sequim on the left side of the chart. And then towards the middle, you'll see when the Great Recession happened, that resulted in significant losses in city revenues for a period of 5 or 6 years. It took 5 or 6 years for the city of Sequim to really recover here. And again, this is one reason why we are very conservative in our sales tax estimates, so that we don't count our chickens before they hatch, and then so that we don't rely on revenues that may not come in to run our operations. And you can see by this chart that although the sales tax rate within the Sequim city limits is 8.8%, only 0.85% actually goes to the city to cover general governmental expenses. The lion's share goes to state and the county. So if you spend $1,000 on a Barca Lounge here in Sequim, only $11 goes to the city's general fund. But you can also see that there's a Sequim transportation benefit sales tax piece, and there's a Sequim public safety piece. And again, these are accounted for in restricted funds because the purpose of those monies is very restricted. Property taxes of $1.7 million comprise 23% of our taxes. We are requesting a 1% property tax increase allowed by law for 2022 for a modest increase of about $54,000 in 2022. But every dollar counts. And again, Connie will be doing more property tax education in the coming meetings. And of course, it is up to council whether or not to approve this, but staff are recommending it. Utility taxes are those taxes imposed upon utilities operating within the Sequim city limits. And the tax is based on the utility's total proceeds or total revenues. It's sort of like asking a neighbor that is holding a garage sale on your property or on your driveway to compensate you a little bit from their proceeds, for you picking up the trash from the garage sale, or serving lemonade, or using your bathroom, or otherwise services provided by you to facilitate somebody else making money. These taxes compose not a significant portion of our total taxes, but they do pay for $1.8 million in general governmental services that we'll talk about soon. And as long as I've been here, there has never been an increase in these charges on the utility. This chart shows how the city of Sequim's utility tax rates compare to our neighboring cities. As you can see on the far left-hand side, Sequim's got very reasonable rates. And cumulatively, if you add them all up together, we're the lowest among them. Again, this is another revenue source that pays for general governmental services. So where does all that money go? Well, once again, these are the categories that are established by the state auditor's office. And as you can see, since the general fund provides general governmental services, and since people do most of that work, that is salaries and benefits represents the largest chunk at 61% of the total cost in the general fund, or about $7 million. Now, the next largest expense is charges for goods and services of $1.9 million, or 16% of the expenses. This includes everything from professional service contracts, utilities, repair and maintenance, software licenses and subscriptions, and travel and meals. Finally, the general fund pays for a whole lot of other stuff that is accounted elsewhere in the budget, like parks projects or street park projects, or arts and culture, or long-term general obligation debt. And so you can see that transfers out, sort of at the top of that chart, are quite large. And then supplies and intergovernmental contracts roll out the remainder of the budget. Now this slide indicates total expenses by division. Obviously you've got City Council at 1% at the top, a rather small portion. And then you've got city administration, and that includes the city manager's office, the clerk's office, communications, human resources, and the administrative pool. The third one down is the City Attorney's Office, which includes both the City Attorney's Office as well as the criminal justice services provided by our contract with Clallam County. Also includes jail, prosecution, defense, and court services. Below that, you've got administrative services. That's me. That's finance, and that's IT, and that's all those transfers that we just talked about. Public Works down below includes Public Works Administration, engineering, facilities maintenance, as well as parks operations. Community development is basically growth planning, development services, and the development engineer. And then finally, you have the police department. So this graph shows the breakdown over the years of total compensation to staff working out of the general fund. The blue portion is wages and salaries, and the red portion is benefits. So of the $7 million in salaries and benefits being paid out in 2022, 74% of that is wages and 36% of that is benefits. So benefits are a significant portion of our budget. Here is a history of our salaries and benefits over time looked at a little bit differently, with 55.49 FTE in 2010 up to 64.22 FTE in 2022. And you can see how the salaries and benefits have increased an average of 4% and 6% over this particular time period. Finally, I just want to advise Council that we've already made a change to the 2022 proposed budget to account for about $60,000 increase in salary and benefit costs for our new city manager. We had originally budgeted this position right around $145,000, and we thought it was significant enough to warrant an adjustment. So you'll see those numbers change by the next time you see the entire budget. So that's it for the quick presentation. Don't forget to email me your questions, comments, or concerns about the 2020 budget, and we'll be bringing those back to you in a public format on October 25th. Thank you for your time today.